Welcome back, folks, to another episode of the Cloud Native Now podcast. I am Sharon Florentine here with Mike Vizard, as usual. We are glad to have you back with us. We got a whole bunch of cool stuff to talk to you about today. The first being the Singularity, the Kubernetes Singularity, if we're being specific. So usually the Singularity always brings to my mind kind of the Terminator-esque, right? Like the technology gets out of hand and then it takes over and it's thinking for itself and it wipes out everything. But I don't know that that's really what this article that we have on Cloud Native Now is talking about when it references the Singularity.
Yeah, I think it references there can only be one. And I think, Sean O'Meara wrote this piece and he's over at Mirantis. But I scratched my head a little bit. And frankly, it kind of highlights the unfulfilled promise of Kubernetes, right? The issue has been, theoretically, at least, we were all supposed to join arms and deploy Kubernetes everywhere, and we would have APIs that everybody could invoke and life would be great. The reality is that, not everything is running on Kubernetes yet, and a large percentage of those monolithic workloads are still running on virtual machines in other places. And secondarily, there's a lot of stuff that runs above Kubernetes in that stack, and all that stuff is, shall we say, non-standard, not even close to being standard, and everybody's got different flavors. So even if we all agreed to run Kubernetes, we still wouldn't have a quote-unquote singularity because all this stuff that sits above it is not exactly highly interoperable, shall we say. So while I appreciate what the article is trying to make that point here, but I kind of read it and I was left with this sense of, the great shame of Kubernetes was that we weren't able to execute on the grand vision to begin with.
Yep. No, and it's interesting because my husband is a developer and we have many developer friends, some of whom came over last night to play some board games and hang out. And as it sometimes does, the conversation turns to Kubernetes and cloud native because some of these folks are wrestling with it in their jobs and hating every second of it. And so the conversation then turned to, why are we doing this cloud native stuff anyway? Like, can't we just go back to monoliths? And so I don't think, now eventually the conversation did turn to, no, there's absolutely value here. And cloud native is going to be the way that the industry eventually goes. We're not there yet. And that abstraction layer is one huge piece of it. The folks that I was talking to last night are really struggling with, how do I work with this thing? It is so deep in the weeds. I need more layers of abstraction. I need more stuff on top of it to be able to make it work the way that it was promised. So maybe then we'll get to the singularity eventually.
Maybe, but the great paradox here is that originally the Kubernetes was promoted by a small handful of elite developers who had the skills and wanted to manage the entire stack themselves, so-called full stack. And the IT operations people were like, well, what is this crazy little animal you guys want to play with? And they were resistant. Then the IT ops people kind of slowly discovered that, well, this is kind of cool because it does allow me some level of centralization. And then they started creating mandates that said to the rest of the developers, thou shalt start writing on this platform. And the rest of the developer community, as far as I can tell, is using frameworks that are at a much higher level of abstraction and are like, why are you dragging me back to the Stone Age to write at this low level of API stuff? Then I spend all my time trying to figure out how to make the infrastructure run. And they don't want to be full stack developers. They just want to kind of write their own code to begin with.
Yeah.
I think, we need better development environments to get to that level of abstraction. But the irony is, the the development community that was supposed to be driving this in the first place is now the ones doing the most resisting.
Well, if we look back on Kubernetes history, right, it was originally Borg. And as we all know, resistance is futile. So, um, so that actually segues nicely into another topic that we wanted to cover, which is platform engineering and the rise of that in alongside and within cloud native. And I think maybe platform engineering can help with that standardization of tools on top. Does that make sense? Or am I
Yeah,
wrong?
there's a good article on the site talking about managing the platform as a product. And if you get into platform engineering, ultimately, that's what you're trying to do is manage the IT services consistently as a product that services those pesky developers we were just talking about,
Yeah.
right? And gives them a consistent experience. And let's be honest about the developers, right? Because they'll speak out of both sides of their mouth. They're like, well, I don't want to do all this stuff. You do it for me. Please take this off my plate. Absolutely, I want you to run that up until the very moment they discover some new tool that they happen to like, and now they want to tweak their development environment and quote unquote customize it to the point where it defeats the purpose of the platform engineering team.
Right.
So this is kind of been where this argument's, I don't know, as long as I can remember, right? You could argue the reason we all embraced DevOps was to get out from under the thumb of the big bad IT centralization man. Now we're running around saying, wait, we need more of the centralization. And, you could imagine that some of the IT folks are probably confused because they don't know if the people love them or hate them. The danger is that platform engineering just winds up being the revenge of centralized IT, and we don't get to something that sits in the middle because that thing in the middle is more art than science. And it's not clear to me that, even if the IT ops teams did everything the developer folks wanted to, they would appreciate it. So it's a conundrum, as they say.
Well, and the interesting part that stood out to me was in the article, it was talking about what makes a good platform. And I think, that the definition of good will change depending on the organization and what the organization needs and what they decide their platform needs to look like to fulfill those developer needs. So I think that definition of a good platform and making that product to be able to sell it to your developers is a little bit unique to every place.
Right. And it's the constantly selling to the developers who are essentially your customers now. And like a lot of customers, they are inconsistent, finicky, and may not say the same thing on the same day.
Exactly. But the customer is always right.
I guess, theoretically, we shall see.
Well, supposedly the entire quote is the customer is always right in matters of taste. So I think maybe we've been interpreting that incorrectly all along.
Sounds like somebody left off that part because it was inconvenient.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Another great piece we had up this week dealt with serverless and meshing serverless with databases, getting closer to serverless with databases. And that has been a huge sticking point with cloud native and Kubernetes this whole time, and how to deal with issues of stateless versus stateful. And I'm not sure if it was last week or the week before we brought up operators and talked about their importance. And this problem remains, right? Scaling is a problem. And then you get to databases, and how do you pull all that data in? It's kind of a mess.
Yeah, it's hard enough to put stateful apps on Kubernetes, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it because, the people like to run around and say, well, you should only run stateless apps on Kubernetes. Well, technically, there's no such thing as a stateless app. Somewhere that data has got to get stored in some sort of persistent fashion. So when we say only run stateless, we just mean store something other than on the Kubernetes platform somewhere using existing storage that somebody else is operating on your behalf. Well, if I'm in an environment that doesn't have an existing platform like that, then I want to deploy a database in a greenfield application. Well, I'm kind of on my own. So now I got to do the whole stateful thing, which is hard. And now I want the stateful thing to take advantage of serverless frameworks that will automatically scale using all these low-level functions and event-driven architectures. And last time I checked, we've been trying to do event-driven architectures for 30 years now. Not doing it well, still not doing it well. So it's hard. And if we can't even get the developers to kind of embrace the core Kubernetes platform, this stuff is like, hardcore rocket science. So I love the idea of it. I'm just not sure that we're quite ready to execute it.
Yeah, I agreed. Agreed. And, another issue that always comes up, and this ties into some pieces that we had on DevOps this week, talking about our favorite topic, observability, right? Mm-hmm. So observability requires that you pull in massive amounts of metric, log, trace data. You got to store it somewhere. It's got to sit there. It's got to get analyzed somehow. And if you don't use it right then, it's got to go somewhere. Where does it go?
Yeah.
How costly is it to store it there?
The somewhat unpleasant surprise of microservices and cloud natives is each of these things generates logs, traces, and metrics. And all that data is constantly being spun up and needs to be ideally aggregated some way or some fashion so I can analyze it. The cost of analyzing and storing all that data gets high. So now all of a sudden I'm sampling that data because I can't afford to store it all. So that kind of defeats the purpose of having the analytics in the first place, because now I'm only analyzing, a small subset of that data. There's been two interesting developments on that front. New Relic has upgraded its internal database so that you can get to that what used to be cold data is now warm data treated in the database, and they'll store it there for 6 years and you can get to that without having to rehydrate it. And then our friends at Observe are making available that data in a S3 bucket for 13 months that you can get to that. And that's a low cost platform for storing just about anything, but they're using the Snowflake platform as a foundation for observability, and Snowflake runs in AWS, so it's all one big happy party from their perspective. I think these are steps forward in the right direction, but clear to me that observability is more crucial in the cloud native space than in the monolithic space. It's nice to have in the monoliths, but I feel like those folks are monitoring predefined metrics more so. They are modernizing those applications and turning subsets of them into microservices, so it will all converge eventually. But when I talk to people about this, the thing that drives them crazy, it's like, okay, this is great. We got all this data. It's awesome. And I can ask any question I want. And I have no idea what question to ask because, the thing is so complex that conceptually I can't wrap my head around the application environment. So I basically wind up launching a bunch of exploratory queries in the hopes that I trip over something. And then when there's an issue, like, there's a performance degradation somewhere in my microservices, it's great to have this observability platform to go look for that, because historically, you might spend months looking for that thing and only fix it by accident one day when you upgraded something else. But I'm not quite clear that that's enough to get people to go, yeah, and here's a large check for an observability platform. So we'll see how all this plays out, but I think you got to reach a certain amount of critical mass of complexity before you get to I got to have observability. And this process has taken a while to play out as far as I can tell.
I think I agree. It's, we've been talking about observability for at least a couple of years now, and it still has not quite made that tipping point into the must-have. I think it's a very, very nice to have if, as you said, you can figure out how to wrangle the data to your advantage. Otherwise, it just seems a little too unwieldy right now.
Yeah, and the irony of it is, in my mind, is that observability has been a core tenet of DevOps as long as anybody can remember. But, it's in the eye of the beholder to what degree do you need it. And so some folks just want to be able to monitor when they mean observability, versus observability, in my mind, means I can go and query the environment to find out what's going on, and interesting things will magically surface. That said, AI might clear all this up for us, right? Because one of the joys of machine learning algorithms is they surface things without me having to know much about anything, and suddenly they'll pop up an alert that essentially says, danger, Will Robinson, this thing is about to fail.
Indeed.
And, theoretically, I should be able to do something about that. So I wonder if we're going to see like observability and AI ops kind of merge in this cloud native space, because people are going to be, oh, wait, I get it. The outcome of the AI ops platform is observability.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So with that,
go ahead. Sorry.
Lots of mergers and acquisitions in this space going forward.
That is our prediction for the week. M&A all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think there may also be tie-ins with security. I always tend to see a security angle or application for observability that may or may not be there, but some of the same issues that may cause things like service degradation or just slowdowns, uptime, downtime, that could be an app failure. It could be an attack. You don't know. And so I think, AI, observability, security, these things are all intertwined.
I think all this stuff is going to meld together. I would argue, and I think you're agreeing with me, is that a security incident is just another type of IT incident. So therefore, I should be able to use the same core observability and AI ops platform to manage that. And by the way, the security people are busily trying to figure out how to shift as much of the responsibility for security operations over to the IT operations people in the first place. So, if you're going to make me responsible for something, you got to give me the capability, and I don't really need 2 additional platforms to achieve it, right? And I want to have one, so I'm not, giving myself whiplash as I move from screen to screen. Yep,
exactly. Exactly. We are in violent agreement on that point. And, we had a couple great pieces on security as code, which is another shift in the movement, to the as code. But as we have talked about a couple times over the last few weeks, Kubernetes is gaining momentum. Cloud native is getting there. We are moving toward all of this new capabilities with observability, but security is still lagging. What the heck has to happen before we can make this a priority?
I think it's there in the article that's on the site, but ultimately, security as code should be an extension of infrastructure as code. And if I'm using YAML files to manage the infrastructure and the provisioning thereof, or some other tool that sits above those YAML files, I should be able to manage the policies and even define the policies as code in the same motion. And so I kind of, I like the whole idea of security as code, but once it becomes code, it just becomes part of the larger DevOps flow, or what some people are calling DevSecOps. But I'm kind of hoping we'll get to the point real soon where security is such a core part of the flow. We won't need to call out the sec part of the DevOps sec flow because it's just something we inherently do. And I think that's kind of how we got to get there. I think, this is all left over from the days of thinking about security as an afterthought. But, if security is a forethought, then, we don't have all these kind of random motions that we're trying to, make work across a series of pipelines and gates that, are, shall we say, unnatural.
Yeah, indeed. All right, folks. Well, I think that will wrap us up for the week. Mike will be at KubeCon starting in, when is that? March 19th through the 22nd. Yeah, in Paris.
Yeah, that is correct. And I'm looking forward to meeting all the good folks at KubeCon. If you see me walking around, just stop me in my tracks, say hi. You can agree or disagree with me. It makes no never mind to me, but I'll just appreciate the conversation no matter what.
Absolutely. And we will see you back here next week for another episode. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.